Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Mahalia Mulema. I am an executive coach. Welcome to another fantastic episode of Ignite Talk. Tonight we're talking about the impact of COVID-19 on pregnancy. I thought this was an important conversation because for the longest of time, the pandemic has brought a lot of anxiety to us as individuals, and I can only imagine how it impacted on pregnant women. So I thought that tonight what we could focus on is just having a wonderful guest. Her name is Tshireletso, and she's going to be talking about her pregnancy journey throughout the lockdown. And yeah, I think it's very important for us just to have that conversation with from a different perspective of someone who's been pregnant throughout the pandemic. I can only imagine how it was for her, amongst other women also. So I'm just going to add her to our chat and go live with her. Just waiting for the network to cooperate. Okay. So just waiting for her to join the live chat, and then we're going to get straight into it. Like I said, we are just talking about the impact of COVID-19 on pregnancy. So this is an important topic because we never think about how the pandemic generally impacted on pregnant women. So tonight, it's important for us just to diverge in this and talk about it and have a discussion around it. I'm still waiting for Tshireletso to join in. I'm assuming her network is giving her problems. So yeah, we'll just wait for her. She's just telling me that network is giving her problems. So we'll just wait for her to join us again and try to be part of the conversation. Network is a problem nowadays. So let's just hope that we won't have that issue tonight. So like I said, that for the longest of time, I've been just wondering how have pregnant women been coping throughout the lockdown? I mean, from visitations to the doctor, the stress they're encountering, getting to the hospitals, that whole entire experience, financial issues, if you don't have medical aid, how's it been impacting on you as a generally. Tshireletso is here. Hi, how are you?
Hi, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I was like, we're not doing this again. The network has not been great for us. But I'm glad that you joined us. How are you doing?
I'm doing well.
Um,
Yeah, I'm doing
Thank you
okay.
for taking time out to
Thank you for
join
having
us
me.
tonight. How has the lockdown been treating you? I mean, I guess we're still on level one, and I think a lot of us forget that we're still on lockdown level one. But how has the lockdown experience been for you? How have you been coping, amongst other things?
It's been quite an adjustment. I've had to adjust quite a bit. Even though I'm someone who generally just likes to sit at home, but having that option taken away from me has been, it's a bit annoying. It's been a little bit
Yeah.
annoying. So even though I don't mind being at home and minding my own business at home, but having the option for me taken away from me has been, yeah, it's been annoying. It's been quite an adjustment as well. It's our new normal.
Absolutely.
So yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, I think, we're all trying to adjust, but it's good to hear that, we're surviving and, we're taking it one step at a time. So that's what's important at this moment. So tonight, I wanted us just to focus on the impact of COVID-19 on pregnancy. And I know that, you've been pregnant throughout the pandemic when it was announced, and it's quite interesting on how it has brought us a level of anxiety. But I can only imagine how it has been on pregnant women. So I thought tonight, let's have this conversation. Let's talk about it. Let's just see, maybe what you can teach us and the coping skills, what you've learned throughout this journey, and take it from them. Without further ado, we'll get straight into it. If you can tell us maybe how was your pregnancy journey throughout the lockdown of the pandemic? How did you cope? How did it go for you?
Right, so I was still in school while I was pregnant, né? So when they announced it, um, I nearly had to drop out actually because of before they announced that okay, you guys can stop coming to school, you guys can stop coming to work. They what they were doing at work was they were prioritizing people who were at risk of
Mm-hmm.
contracting the virus. So that's what that would be pregnant women, people who are elderly or people with chronic illnesses. So I was this close to having to drop out because we didn't know if we would still be required to go to work. And since I'm a I commute to work using public transport and I go to school using public transport, so I was at risk. So I remember having a conversation with our director at where I was working at the time, and they were like, "You might have to drop out of the program, but we'll see what the president says." So that was anxiety provoking because I had this whole plan last year that okay, I found out that I was pregnant, but my pregnancy and my plan, I could work around it. You know, I was going to be able to just work around it and finish. So it was quite anxiety provoking. Um, I had something very serious to think about because it was going to impact my life, literally my entire year and my life for the future.
Mm-hmm.
But pregnancy during lockdown, in as much as enjoying the pregnancy, I feel like lockdown or the whole COVID situation, it kind of took away from the experience that I thought I would have during my pregnancy. You know, I mean, having to go to doctor's appointments alone, you know, not having someone to hold your hand or someone to support you, giving birth alone with no one in the room except your doctors and your nurses. So you can imagine what would go through any pregnant woman's mind when during that whole thing. I'm preparing for the baby's birth, you know, having to buy things that you would welcome the baby with when the shops were closed. And, you know, even though I gave birth during level 3, when the shops had already opened, you can now imagine what the women that gave birth in April and May were going through because I think they only started allowing for people to purchase baby clothing in May, if I'm not mistaken. So the women who gave birth in March and April who had not bought anything for their babies, you can imagine how that was for them. And, you know, I actually joined this group on Facebook. It's a support group for pregnant women. And I would read through the comments of how people are coping, how this whole thing is for pregnant women. And, you know, a lot of them, it does affect you. It did affect us mentally. I won't lie. Because although pregnancy is a physical journey, but I think not everybody takes into consideration that it is also a mental and emotional and spiritual journey. So you can imagine having to adjust to, okay, I'm pregnant, I have physical changes, but you also have mental and emotional changes, and you have spiritual changes for some of us as well. So you can imagine what the impact of being now COVID and how that kind of shifts everything would have on someone who's pregnant.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like twice the impact it actually has if, you know, there was no pandemic in general. And what I'm hearing that pregnancy, it's not only a physical transition, but there's a psychological, there's a spiritual space that goes into it because the support means a lot, you know, having your partner there, having your friends there, having your loved ones there. So when you're going through it alone because of, you know, because of the restrictions throughout the lockdown, being alone, that is quite scary, especially if it's your first child. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because you've never been through that type of journey, and now you are having to sit here, be alone. And like you mentioned, that going through the doctor's appointments alone, the birth alone. And I actually never thought about what you mentioned, like those that actually gave birth from the beginning of the lockdown to level 4, let's say, how it was for them. And this is when we possibly could see the increase of postpartum depression, because then it brings a lot of anxiety, worry, concern for the mothers, and so forth. You mentioned obviously you had to be alone in your doctor's appointments. You mentioned giving birth alone besides your doctors. how was your support system, family, your loved ones, even though they couldn't be with you throughout the appointments or the birth, being the birth room? How was the support with them? Was there any sense of support emotionally?
So what I learned is that support goes a long way. Even if you just have that one friend who's there for you, that presence, that support goes a long way. You know, like I mentioned, being pregnant is not just about you having a whole physical journey where your body changes. uh, from the moment you find out that you're pregnant, something happens to you mentally, you know, something happens to you emotionally. I mean, for me, it only, like, even though when I found out I was pregnant, I was like, okay, I'm pregnant. But I only really, really bonded with my baby when I was like 4 months, 5 months pregnant, because you have to, it's about accept, you have to accept, you know, you start thinking, okay, how is my life going to change? What am I going to do? So I went through a whole mental preparation and a whole emotional preparation, uh, 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 and it took me a while to actually start emotionally bonding with my baby. Even though I'm consciously aware that okay, I'm pregnant. I take care of myself, right? I eat well. I take my prenatal vitamins. I go to my doctor's appointments. But already just that portion, you know, having to adjust and acceptance, having to accept that aside, I'm actually pregnant. It took me quite a while to actually get to that thing. Okay, Tshireletso, you're pregnant now. So when I say that support goes a long way, when I had to go tell my father alone that I'm pregnant, ne? And you know, that's like, hey, you go there.
I can only imagine the conversation.
I actually expected the worst out of the conversation. I went there, okay, yeah, no, I'm going to be told my stuff. But he was amazed, like him being accepting and supportive at that very moment. That's what changed it for me. That okay, I'm not going to go through this alone. He's there for me. I was actually very surprised. I was expecting a whole lecture, but he was like, okay.
You were ready. You had prepared the whole conversation with yourself. You're like, oh my gosh.
But you know, he was accepting. He was accommodative, and when you hear the words, okay, I'll be there for you. You're just hearing, okay, I'm going to be there for you all every step of the way. You're not going to go through this alone. That change, that's that positive change that you kind of go through mentally and emotionally. Okay, I'm not going to be alone in this whole thing. I have someone who, especially someone as important as like your parent or your grandparent, any sort of family member that you're close to, having that reassurance for them helps, you know, with the whole adjusting mentally, adjusting emotionally with the whole thing. So support goes a long way. My family has been tremendously supportive. You know, when I had to start going to the OBGYN now for appointments. It was in March, ne? And that's when lockdown was announced. So my grandmother wanted to go with me. Mary, they turned her back, so she had to go wait outside. So now imagine having that was actually my first full on scan, and that was the first one, and she wanted to be there, you know, to ask questions and to hold my hand.
Yes.
But unfortunately, because of the restrictions, they were like, no, only patients are allowed in. So it was kind of like, it was disappointing. It was kind of sad. So now I had to go sit there like a whole 2 hours alone, you know, waiting for the doctor to see me. And, you know, obviously also not having your partner there or the baby's father, if you guys are going through the whole thing together, it's also quite sad. You know, it takes away, I feel like for a lot of pregnant women, the whole COVID, especially if you had a whole idea of how you would like to enjoy your pregnancy, it took away from the expectations you kind of had with regarding how you would like to experience your pregnancy. But for me, I took it as a thing, one day at a time. My appointments, I went, sat there. Uh, I had virtual support, so to speak. So my dad would call me, "Oh, appointment thing, okay, sharp, okay, tell me how it goes." My grandmother also would want feedback. My friend would like keep me company on the phone while I'm waiting for the doctor. We would talk on the phone. Even like with the hospital that I had to go to, the staff were actually quite accommodating and very nice as well. So because they also understand the difficulties of having to go through, or the challenges, or the emotional having to go through this alone. They would also kind of engage and just trying to make you feel at ease, trying to make you feel calm. So, I mean, with me, every appointment was kind of anxiety provoking because for some reason, for every appointment date, on the morning of my appointment date, my baby would not move. Ne? So, you know, you get, not just stay. And I would worry, you know, you worry that, I hope today's appointment goes well. You know, I hope everything is fine. I hope that there's a happy day. Because those are the things that you think about for for your entire pregnancy. You're thinking, is she moving? Is he moving? I hope when I go to the doctor, there's a heartbeat today, you know, and I hope there's not going to be any complications. Like you have all these questions, you have all these worries. So now imagine all those worries accompanied by the whole anxiety that comes with the pandemic and the impact and how it kind of affects you or how it contributes to how you feel and think about your pregnancy, you know. But support is important. I cannot emphasize how support for me, how support like the support I got from my family and from my friends. I cannot emphasize how that helped me get through it. You know, when I gave birth, the day that I went into labor was the day I had to go get tested for COVID. Né? It's a protocol that the hospital did so that if you do test positive, then they could like prepare for you and your baby once the whole thing happens. So funny enough, I gave birth 4 days earlier than my expected due date. So on the Monday was the Monday that I had to go test for COVID. And I was so nervous. And you know, testing for COVID is also quite painful because they stick this whole thing either up your nose or down your nose.
It is painful.
Yeah, it is painful. So for me, even though my doctor said they shouldn't do the nasal swab, they had to do the throat swab, but it was also as uncomfortable, and because they stick it right down, and I was just so nervous because now I'm worried. Okay, what if I test positive? Even though I hardly ever went out, I sat at home as a precautionary measure. What if I test positive? What's going to happen? What does it mean for my baby? What does it mean for me? I remember reading on Facebook or in that group that I joined, one mother tested positive and they had to separate her from her baby for a while they are treating her and just checking on how she is, you know, and what they would do is they would only bring her baby each nurse. And they would obviously have to wear a mask, wearing gloves and all those things. So she would nurse her baby. After nursing, they take the baby away so that the baby doesn't, because I'm also like maybe contract the virus. So I was also thinking about that, and what if that happens? You know, what am I going to do? But luckily for me, I tested negative, but I only got the results way after I had given birth. And so on that day, that's when I actually went into labor that day. I went into labor. My family dropped me off, and that was it. Like, there was no one to hold my hand, no one to help me through the breathing. And it's very scary, hey? Because even when you get there, the moment you realize that, okay, I'm in labor, now you start thinking, yes, okay, I hope there are no complications. I hope it's not, because it can happen that when you go check yesterday, your baby has a heartbeat, but when you give birth and then suddenly there's no heartbeat, those kind of things happen. So now you have that anxiety that accompanies sort of, okay, I hope there are no complications today. I hope I'm not going to give birth to a stillborn. I hope there aren't, that I'm going to go home with my baby. You know, all those thoughts, the questions that I hope. So either I hope I don't go home alone, or I hope my baby doesn't go home alone, because there are complications that arise during birth as well. So I had to go through the entire labor experience on my own, which was very scary, but I had virtual support. I remember I was video calling my best friend and she was panicking. And I'm like, but why are you panicking? I'm the one in labor. Stop panicking,
Exactly.
you know? Yeah, and I also, my brother as well, I would be talking to him the entire time. He was also panicking when I told him that I'm in labor. He's like, you know, which was quite funny because I'm the one in labor.
No?
Yeah, you know, so so I had to go through the whole thing alone, and you know, the anxiety that comes with going through that experience, having to go through that alone. I don't even have words to describe how mentally challenging it was, and how also, because I cried for it, but how sad it was for I have to go through this alone. You know, there's no one to help me through my breathing. There's no one to hold my hand. There's no one to wrap my back. I have to be alone. and the nurses can only give you that support. They can only go to a certain
Yeah,
extent
of
to give you
course,
that
of
support.
course, of
At
course.
the back of your mind, you're thinking, I have to be here alone. And you have to give birth wearing a mask. Now imagine having to push and breathe wearing a mask. You know how difficult it is to to push
And
and
when you're
breathe wearing
pregnant,
a
it's
mask.
like twice.
Yeah. So it was one of the most emotionally challenging, never mind the first, we already know how challenging it is to give birth now. It was one of the most emotional and mentally challenging experiences that I've had to go through, bearing in mind what comes with COVID, you
Mm,
know.
mhm,
Yeah.
mm. Wow, that story sounds like it was a journey. And I mean, it does sound that, your family, your loved ones were there for you. And I liked the different ways. I mean, they gave support. I know that physically, there was no sense of support that it could be given. But the fact that we can only thank God for technology being available to us. So imagine if this was still in the 1991 or whatever the case may be, and there's no cell phones there, no video calls, and you're
Yeah.
sitting there alone in the hospital, the anxiety could have been intense, But it sounds like you've had an amazing support system that has been there for you.
I had, and also the lessons that came with it. Because one of the most important things that I learned now was that, typically when you're pregnant, people only talk to you about your physical appearance. So it's, oh, you're carrying high, or you're carrying low, or your nose came out to play, my favorite. But no one really, no one really asks you how you're doing mentally or emotionally, because and it's also kind of, it's tricky because either you wait out, but when you say to people, ish, this is how I'm feeling mentally and emotionally or spiritually as far as my pregnancy. But also you have that thing of, but why aren't these people asking me how I'm doing mentally and emotionally? Because the most common thing that people only ask you about when you're pregnant is your physical appearance. That's it. Like for me, I never had anyone ask me, how are you doing mentally? How are you doing emotionally? How are you doing spiritually? That's one of the most important things that I've learned. So, but it was also kind of like, okay, but do I initiate it? But also I would think, but I'm pregnant. Why aren't you asking me how I'm doing?
Exactly.
you know so I mean, I would also, like, if you have pregnant loved ones, don't just talk to them about the physical things that you see, because you don't know what this person is going through internally that you are not aware of. So ask about their mental well-being, ask about their emotional well-being, because like I said, it took me a while for me to emotionally and mentally adjust to me being pregnant. I experienced several symptoms of depression for a while before I could actually come out of it. So it's kind of important to check in, not just on the physical, that are you eating, are you gaining weight or whatever, but ask the person, how are you doing mentally? Have you accepted your pregnancy? How do you feel about your pregnancy? Are you looking forward to a journey? Are you okay? And another thing is, with the mothers that I would engage with on that group on Facebook is, when you having maybe a meltdown and then people attribute it, but get the hormones. How, guys?
And I'm sure that at that moment, that's not what you want to hear, because it's like,
Yeah,
you know,
you know,
mhm.
so they're like, get the hormones, but what if it's not hormones? Because I'm telling you, with my pregnancy, I never had the ups and down hormones. So if I felt
Right.
low, it's because something was happening that made me feel low.
Okay.
So if I'm acting different, you cannot, because I know, the self-awareness and the mindfulness I have of myself. If I was low, I knew that it can't be hormones because I know myself.
Mhm.
So if I was feeling low, it would be a matter of, okay, why? I would ask myself, why am I feeling low today? Did something happen?
Right.
Or did I think about something that kind of triggered this emotion that's
Yeah.
making me feel low? And it would be that, okay, maybe I'm stressed, or I'm sad that I'm not going to see a loved one for a certain time, or my mom is not here. I'm feeling sad because my mom is not here, or my dad is not here, or maybe I had a fight with the father of the baby. So it's not hormones. It's because something actually happened that made me feel low, and it
Something.
affects me. Yeah,
Yes.
there's something that triggered my emotional or mental state at the time. So it's kind of important to not always attribute a pregnant woman's reaction or their feelings to the hormones, because it's not always the hormones, you know. And it was
True.
kind of sad to have to engage with those women who literally didn't have support. So you don't have support for your pregnancy, and then you're not working, or there's no income, or your family is acting funny, and then people take it hormones, but it's not really hormones. It's because this person is going through these mental and emotional challenges as far as their pregnancy is concerned, and there's a situation that's contributing to how they are feeling.
Mm.
Yeah.
So what I'm hearing from this is that one, you were very self-aware. I mean, you have a great relationship with yourself, which then led you to being able to cope better with the the journey of your pregnancy, and
Yeah.
then that also helped you to be mindful of the journey of your pregnancy, and you knew what triggered you at that moment in time. It could have been stress, it could have been a fight, it could be you missing a loved one, and all throughout that has helped you be able to manage that and being able to identify if you're either stressed or starting to experience depression symptoms. I just
Yeah.
want to read the comments that have come through. Um, I'm a, I am underscore Batu B. She says that this is so true. She found out that she was pregnant when she was 3 months and a half. And someone, okay, Kitu Wise, she asked, what were you most anxious about? I think you had answered that already. You were anxious about the journey itself, being alone, not having support system, amongst other things. You had mentioned pregnancy. I want us to tap into postpartum depression. And I think this happens a lot when you don't have great support structure and lack of resources. But I think postpartum doesn't happen after pregnancy; it starts during pregnancy.
During
But
pregnancy. Yeah.
most of the symptoms we only recognize them throughout, or rather after the pregnancy. And I like the fact that you mentioned that pregnancy is not only a physical journey, but it's a psychological. It's a mental journey. And I think these are the type of conversation we never have, especially in relationships. I think for a man, for example, would be easy to say, hey, I want a child, you know, but what does it mean when you say, well, you want a child? Are you going to be there to be supportive to your partner? You know, are you going to point out that, hey, you're hormonal, let me leave you alone? You know what I mean? Are you going to be with her throughout the pregnancy journey? Are you going to be at the doctor's appointment? Are you going to, you know, make sure that she is in a better space? Because yes, she's carrying the child, but there's so much you can also do as a father to make sure that the mother is at peace. But I think in the culture of where we are today in society, not a lot of people actually support the woman. And because of the journey maybe of society or the generational journeys, for example, the pregnancy has always relied on a woman. And because women have been strong and never spoke out on the journey how it was, and a lot of times had led to postpartum depression. What is postpartum depression? What is it that perhaps the symptoms we can look out for in postpartum depression?
So simply put, it's the type of depression that occurs or that a woman goes through after pregnancy. That's the general definition. But
Okay.
there is a misconception that it only happens after. But you're right, it can start during pregnancy, because even though I wasn't officially diagnosed with it, but I could recognize the symptoms of depression that I was having during my pregnancy. You know, that's why it took me so long to start bonding and bonding with my baby while I was still pregnant. So it can begin during pregnancy, like I said, and there's also a misconception that it only happens with your first child, but actually it can happen with any number. With your second child, with your third child, even with your 10th child, it can happen. So you might not have it with your first child, but you can go through it with your fifth child as well.
Yeah.
And the common symptoms that you can look out for is being withdrawn. loneliness, having difficulty bonding with your child, anxiety that you go through, the stress that you go through, feeling disconnected from your baby, even feeling disconnected from yourself. Because I remember at some point I felt disconnected with myself. So even though I'm consciously aware that I'm pregnant, remember I said I took care of myself. I exercised, I ate well, I took my prenatal vitamins, but I I felt there was something that was just not okay in me, and you with other symptoms is the woman feels like when the baby arrives, you feel like you're not doing enough, you find it difficult to bond with your child, or you being too hard on yourself, or when your child is crying, for example, you start crying because you don't know what to do, or you're feeling a certain kind of way. Uh, so there's a lot of symptoms that you can actually look out for, besides the normal sadness, hopelessness, anxiety, feeling disconnected from your baby, feeling disconnected from yourself. There's quite a bit that I also went through. And at some point I would ask myself, like, will I during my pregnancy, while I was going through that grief depression period, am I going to be able to love this baby enough? It's because I was thinking, but Tshireletso, why are you taking so long to bond with your child? Are you going to be able to love her? Those kind of questions. So it happens it starts actually during pregnancy. And the contributing factors, the common contributing factors to these kind of things is obviously not having support. If you're having a fight with the father, or if you don't have support from your family, economic issues like financial problems, are you working, how are you going to support, that socioeconomic stress that comes with pregnancy.
Of course.
Now, I feel like also now for this year, COVID has made it on the list of contributing factors to postpartum depression because of the impact it's had on the economy. People have lost jobs. I remember I spoke to one pregnant lady. She was about to give birth, but she wasn't fired. The company had to close down.
Yeah.
And she was about to give birth. At least for her, she bought things like a few months before the whole COVID thing. But now she was stressing that, what am I going to do now? I don't have a job. And that also, I could identify in her that she is heading towards that postpartum depression because of the stresses or the anxiety or challenges that she's thinking about once the baby gets there. She doesn't have a job. The father's not active. The family was a bit funny, they were like, okay, we're there, but they were not really actively supporting her. I remember she explained it and said, they are just verbally supportive, but there's no action to what they're saying, so that's also another important contributing factor. So support as well is a contributing factor. If you don't have support, it's going to be very hard on you, and that's why I felt compelled. I don't know, maybe it's me and my previous work experience, but whenever I would reach out for me to know these things, because I would feel so like, okay, let me reach out. Hi, I'm so and so. I read your comment. Listen, if you want to talk to someone, I'm here. Because it was so sad. It was so sad that this person would post like the entire life challenges about their pregnancy and their family on Facebook, and feel like I don't have someone to talk to, guys. That's why.
Yes.
Yeah. But reach out and say, listen, if you want to talk, I'll be your ear. And yeah. And so I would offer that, but I also found it important to limit myself, because it happens that you take on other people's things, so I would also have to set boundaries and limit myself and how long and how much I can talk to this person, so that I don't carry the person's emotional baggage with me. And another thing that I realized was, with me, in my circle, I'm the person who's mindful and aware enough to ask you how you're doing emotionally or mentally regarding your pregnancy. And I would ask, but why am I not being asked this by my family and friends? And I realized you cannot expect people to be a you, right? So even though I know that if Lerato's pregnant, I'm not just going to ask Lerato about how she's doing physically. I'm going to ask her how she's doing mentally and emotionally. But I cannot expect that when I'm pregnant, Lerato will do that, because what if she's not bringing it up because maybe she's scared, and also maybe she's expecting me to bring it out. So that I had that little challenge that, but why are they not asking me, or should I initiate it? So it's also having to understand that not everyone is in me. Not everyone is going to approach a situation that the way that I would do it. So that's the kind of thing that could also, the expectations that you have, and then you feel like, but these people are not meeting my expectations and I'm pregnant. That can also contribute to you developing symptoms, because you'd feel like people don't care about you. Then you feel like I don't have a support system. But you actually do. It's just not the way that you have it in your mind. Yeah.
Mm. Wow, that is such a mouthful. I mean, I'm hearing that support is such a big factor, especially in
Mm.
pregnancy, you know. Goodness, I'm learning a lot. I was like, I'm ready to be a mom. Yay. Until today, I'm like, okay, let's take a break on that thought. But I mean, pregnancy is beautiful, you know. I think everything in life has its own journey. And I do hear that the important part is support. It goes a long way, you know. Also, having great resources plays a huge role.
Mm.
If you don't have resources, loss of jobs, you know, it creates a lot
Mm.
of burden, not being able to know how you're going to be able to provide for the child, you know what I mean?
Mm.
And it's a
Yes, yeah.
lot, it's a lot, especially also perhaps how the journey of, you know, the relationship between you and the father, the mother and the father, if it's
Mm.
great, you know, it also plays a huge role. And if, you know, maybe perhaps there's a breakup in that also, it becomes such a
Mm.
journey, because now you also have to grieve the loss of the relationship while also trying
Mm.
to enjoy this journey that you're in, and being mindful of not being pregnant. I'm just going to read a few comments. um Talumzi says, I hope I'm pronouncing your name properly. Postnatal depression can also be caused by disappointment from the expectation you had from people close to you. I think you've mentioned that. Absolutely, Lee Wavy. I have a colleague who just went on maternity 2 weeks ago, and the weekend her leaving, she gave birth. So she was very much close to having a baby at the office, and the amount of stress she had, and she seems sad right there. She comments again and says that full 9 months going to work and carrying work stress throughout her pregnancy
Mm.
stressed me, as well as she is my friend. I learned everything about feelings and pregnancy through her. Listen, I'm also learning about pregnancy through this conversation right now, because sometimes we assume that pregnancy, like you say, it's carrying the baby and the psychological stress, but it's more
Mm.
than that, you know. And I
It's
think
more than that,
this
yeah.
topic is so important, because I feel like I wish a lot of people could have watched, more so men could have watched, because, you know, it's so easy to say, I want a child, but how much
Mm.
are you really going to be there to fully support the mother who's carrying the
Yeah,
child, to be there for
yeah.
you? Uh,
And I think that, especially also with my pregnancy, what I learned, especially with the father of my child, was, they one of the key things, or one of the things that can easily get you into labor very quickly, is when your high blood pressure is high. It causes complications, ne?
mm,
So yes, relationships have problems, but I feel like sometimes fathers or men, you kind of need to be mindful and take into consideration that when you make her upset, ne, it
mm,
raises your BP. And if mom is not okay, baby's not okay. Sometimes I don't think fathers or men understand that what
no,
mommy feels, baby feels. So if
mm,
I'm in distress, my baby's going to be in distress, right? So with me, I feel like I'm so lucky that I have a psych background, because that's what helped me to be able to just um, take care of myself and know when to step away from something. If you understand what I'm saying? Because being mindful and being awake, I could easily identify that, okay, this conversation, I had that pressure, and then I just walk away, because I'm trying to take care of not just
that
myself, but
conversation.
yeah, but my baby.
Mm,
Because you would mention that, listen, what you're doing is causing me stress. Stop doing that. And then you start being told, "Kore, you like complaining."
yes. Oh, you are such a woman. Oh my gosh. Oh, you crazy. All these words
And it's
again
not
that you say
that
to
I'm
us.
not being crazy. And or motari. Remember when I said get
The
hormones?
hormones.
It's not.
Yes.
I don't think that you need to take into consideration that what the mother feels, the baby feels. If the mother is in distress, the baby is in distress, and the baby takes in what the mother is going
Mm.
through. So, yes, you will have problems with your partner, it's fine, but fathers can kind of talk to your partner if you can, and find out what can I do better to not give you so much stress or to not contribute to whatever other challenges that you're going through, So, um, yeah, I think men and fathers, they kind of have to have this conversation with
Can
pregnant
men
women.
join this conversation because this is important, I mean,
It's very
being a father,
important.
you're not
Mm,
yourself carrying the child, but
mm,
your behavior impacts on the mother and throughout the
yeah.
pregnancy. And it's so
Mm,
important because then, I like what you mentioned also, that the blood pressure goes up. I think in general, even in relationships, they increase our blood pressure, and then they want to say you are crazy, or you hormones, or you are in your period, all these names that they mention.
And it's
um,
very, and the thing is, BP is very dangerous. If your BP is high during pregnancy, that puts you at risk of having an at-risk pregnancy.
mm,
So, these are the kinds of things that if you're a father or even if you're not together with the mom, ne,
mm,
try to take that into consideration. You guys might not be together, but take that into consideration as well, that, okay, this person is carrying a life. And
mm,
to some degree, I'm responsible for that life. I mean, you might not, if you don't care. I remember I spoke to some pregnant lady and she was like, the father, her baby daddy doesn't care about her.
mm,
She doesn't care what happens to her. And she said, I'm like, so I asked her, how did you respond to that? She says, I told her, okay, if you don't care about me, please think about your child. You
mm,
might not care what happens to me, but at least take into consideration how your child is feeling inside of me while I'm going through what you're making me go through. It was a very sad conversation that I had with her. "Ai, Batung, it's tough, it's challenging.
definitely.
Yeah,
Yes.
especially if the new mom or expectant mom and dad are not clicking. I think
Yes.
the father tends to forget that I still need to be a certain way to not affect how this person is feeling during their pregnancy. Because you need to consider that what you are making the mother go through, you're also making your child go through that.
Mm. Hopefully they will acknowledge this
Mm,
particular subject you're talking about.
mm,
Talim says letting your voice heard while pregnant should be done with caution in order to avoid the get your hormones talking kind of situation. See, now again,
mm,
we have to be sensitive to them. See, that's the thing. Like, why can't they be sensitive to us? And that's what you mentioned, that must why must you ask people, why can't they ask you, for example, are you okay? Why should you
mm,
bring that on the table? But I guess empathy is not something that everybody knows how to exercise or to practice.
mm,
And we need to be mindful of that, unfortunately. Terrence
mm.
underscore oh, I hope I'm pronouncing your surname right, says that how long after birth do these shared feelings, emotions between the mother and baby last?
There's
Um,
no there's
mhm.
no timeline. It's a subjective experience. So for one mother and child, it could happen in 3 months. For another, it could take years. So there's no timeline
True.
unless you go
Absolutely.
and unless if you go and get professional help. But even if you go and get professional help, because it's your own subjective experience, there's no timeline.
Mm,
So how you go about it will not be the same as how I
correct.
would go about or how the other mother would go about it.
I think also being mindful of everybody's personality is different. Every
Mm,
pregnancy is different, and everybody's worldview is different. So it could be easily triggered by something, or maybe these emotions can be shortened, and maybe the father can be supportive, whatever the case may be. So, like you say, that it is subjective, it's different for everybody. So
mm,
yeah, let's just talk about the risk factors to look out for in these individuals. For example, what happens if they don't access treatment, whatever the case may be? What risk factors could mothers potentially experience if they don't deal with these symptoms?
During pregnancy or after?
Both.
Well, the thing is, you know, what it's not just when something, obviously when something physical happens to you, it does affect your child, right? Because it's a physical thing. But also things like stress, just like absolutely Libe mentioned, stress, having another mental health illness, maybe anxiety, that also it's also something that affects your baby. So that kind of thing, while you're pregnant, it can put you at an at-risk pregnancy. So you can either give birth before term, so maybe having a preemie baby because of stress, and so not thinking about the medical aspects, but from a psych or from a mental health point of view, stress, anxiety, and maybe depression, they can actually put someone at risk of having an at-risk pregnancy or an at-risk birth.
Mm-hmm.
You know, so if I would say to people, if you can't afford to see a counselor or a psychologist or a social worker, if you have that one person to just help you through it, it will make all the difference in the world. Because I have a psychologist, but I never saw her because of lockdown, and I wasn't really keen on doing the whole therapy like this. So I would talk to my friends, I would talk to my friends, and I would just take and say, you know what, I want to talk. Something is making me upset, or I'm feeling a certain way. I want to talk. And then just having a platform to take out whatever that's bothering you inside, it goes a long way. And it's good for your health as well, because you have to take care of your overall not well health. So yes, that I'm taking care of myself physically, but you have to take measures to take care of yourself mentally and emotionally. So if you have that one person, be it your mother, your father, or that one friend, even if it's a stranger on Facebook, like I said, I was this for like a few women on Facebook where I would reach out because I could understand where they were coming from. And, on that group, I don't even know why I joined the group. I was just reading comments and I would reach out to people because I think I joined the group to kind of see
What
to see
happened?
what's happening, and then I would read and I'm like, but this group actually it's like it's a virtual support group for women, and so if you can, even if it's a total stranger who says talk to me, fine. If you are comfortable with that, talk to
Just
the
being able to
person
release.
who's being able to release that, and having someone tell you words that say those keywords, it's going to be okay, they go a long way. It's going to
Absolutely.
be fine. It's
Absolutely.
yeah, it's gonna just hearing it's going to be okay,
Absolutely.
or saying to the person, you're not alone.
Yeah.
You have someone. You're gonna be okay. You're gonna get through this. Just hang in there. You
Mm-hmm.
know. Also, I remember I spoke to a suicidal mother as well,
Mm-hmm.
and in my experience, you don't say, because there were other mothers who would say, think about your child, your innocent child. That's not what she wants to hear. you know. So I would read the comments on her wanting to take her life and her baby's life, and the other mothers on the thing would be like, no, think about your child and all those things, those kind of phrases. And I knew that that's not what she wants to hear. So I inboxed and I'm like, what I said to her, what do you want to talk about? Talk to me. And after talking to me, she was okay. She just needed someone who cared enough to just say, okay, I'm going to listen to you. Tell me what's on your mind. And yeah, so just having that one person, if you can't access doctors, resources, psychologists, talk to or even your gynae. My gynae would also ask me questions just to see how I'm doing. Are you okay? How are you doing? Because you're there. So for that 20 minutes that you're there, you can use that as a bonus and just get whatever that's bothering you out.
Wow. Today's show has been so informative for me. I've learned a lot, and I feel like, as a child-free woman, this information has been so informative for me, and I've learned so much because I can now know or have an informed conversation, not only with myself, but with my partner, to be saying, if we're going to have a child, this is what it means. You know what I mean? Like, a child is not something one carries alone. We're carrying it
Mm.
together emotionally, psychologically, mentally. So the journey needs to be less stressful for me unless it's a medical issue. Before we do close the show, I think it's very important for us to share self-help tips. You mentioned that sometimes not being able to access treatment is not something that's easy, but when you are at home, being able just to, like that sense of self-awareness that you have with yourself, what self-help tips would you be able to provide for people to use at home and take it from there?
So obviously exercise. I'm always going to say exercise. That really worked.
You exercise a
It
lot.
helped me a lot. Exercise, I exercise, and the heavier you get, the less you can do. But even if it's just a walk, when I felt really heavy, I would just go out and take a walk. I remember I started doing video journals, and the idea was maybe when she's older, I'll show her. I'll still decide because when I go back and watch it, because with some I was really emotional. With some of them I was
That is
very
so amazing.
emotional.
I actually like that video journal. I like that.
Yeah, so I would do them like monthly. So today I'm 3 months. I will talk about how that's like for me. So with the one that I can remember the contents of was for I think my 5th month. So that was the first time I felt her cake. So I'm like, okay, today we are 5 months. You are 5 months. You're almost here. This is how and then I would say how I'm feeling about it. I'm feeling worried. I'm anxious. I'm hoping that so I'm voicing out the concerns that I have because sometimes you don't have someone to voice them out to, like who's right there. So I'll just voice them out, having that whole monologue kind of thing on my own and say, this is what I'm worried about. I'm hoping that you're okay, you're healthy. I'm doing my best to take care of myself. I'm eating well. I'm doing my I'm doing my best to take care of myself. I hope that when I go for my next appointment, that your heart will still be beating. I'm hoping that you're going well. No neurological illnesses or disorders, or I'm hoping that you're going to be a healthy child. And I'm worried that yeah. So I'll voice out whatever worries and concerns I have for her and for myself. And I would also say my plan. Okay, well, I'm busy with my internship now. I'm busy with school, but this is my plan. And it would comfort me because I know that okay, this even though COVID happened and it kind of shifted things, but I'm doing my best. This is how I'm feeling. Or if I wake up happy today, I'm happy. This is why I'm happy. If I wake up sad today, I'm sad. And when I'm trying to think about why I'm sad, but I can't exactly pinpoint. But hopefully throughout the day, I'll be able to identify why I'm feeling sad today, or why I'm crying, or why I'm feeling angry. And being able to think about, okay, today I woke up sad. Why am I feeling sad? Maybe it's a dream I had.
Yeah.
So I'm sad because I had a dream about this, and when I woke up this morning, I felt really sad about it. But it's going to be okay. And for me, obviously, like remember when I said pregnancy is a spiritual journey. I cannot tell you, my spirituality went on a hike the moment I found out that I was pregnant, because because first of all, I'm black, ne? I know what black people are capable of. So
absolutely.
Yeah, so it took me a while. I didn't announce my pregnancy to people until I was like 4 months. So if you spend a lot of time with me, that's what you would notice, because I'm a petite person. So now you see that but this one is gaining weight. So if you're close to me, you'd see that, okay, I see your changes. But my spirituality and my connection with God, it went
heightened.
It heightened, because I also that's why I said that pregnancy is also a spiritual journey, because depending on who you are, but for me, I started praying more, I started having faith more, I started acknowledging and experiencing this beautiful thing that's happening, that I'm a woman and I'm capable of carrying a life, I'm bringing the life into this world. And
absolutely.
Also for my child to be protected, for her tiny little soul to be protected, for her tiny little spirit to be protected. So I prayed a lot. I would meditate a lot in my room, prayed a lot. Another thing is I spoke about mindfulness and another self-help, speaking to someone, even if it's not a therapist or a counselor, journaling I mentioned. So yeah, those are the things that really helped me get through, not just because of COVID, but also with the overall pregnancy experience and its impact on my emotional and mental well-being was exercising, journaling, praying, being mindful, being able to identify how I'm feeling and why I'm feeling the way that I'm feeling. It helps a lot because then you don't walk around carrying something so heavy. Because when you carry things way more, it's
Absolutely.
yeah. So being able to identify that, okay, this is why I'm feeling, and then you can choose to release it. That okay, I'm not going to carry this with me. Let me just let it go, and then it'll help you feel a little bit lighter as well.
Can you please bring her in now? I think we've been talking about her, and I think she should, we should be
So,
able to see her. This
hey,
lovely
hey,
person.
the uncle doesn't want to give me.
No, uncle, can we see the baby? No, this is about her. We wouldn't have a show if it wasn't for her,
It wasn't for her.
She's our celebrity woman crush.
Yeah, she's my. I learned a lot. Having this child, it taught me a lot, not just about myself, but about life. About life.
Hey, girl.
Hi.
Hey. Hello. She's just like, what's happening? Oh my gosh. She is the cutest.
Number two.
Hello. Yes, thank you. That's what we were waiting for. Tshireletso, thank you so much for sharing so much knowledge with us. Thank you for taking us through your pregnancy journey. Thank you for sharing us so much information. I'm going to be able to distribute this to a lot of platforms because I feel like a lot of women should be able to, get access to this information, and we need to be able to just provide this information to other women. I'm not a mom yet, but this information has been grateful, and I'm sure it's going to be grateful to other mothers who are pregnant currently or after the pregnancy. This information has been great, and you have a beautiful daughter, and thank you for sharing her with us. She is the cutest ever. We're having baby fever.
Don't put it off for a while. Don't. Not easy.
Okay, good night, Ria. I hope that you sleep well. I mean, Ria Batonhle, kopa o re nage. She is like not about our life, but
Oh,
thank you so
thank
much
you.
again.
Thank you
Thank you
for
so
having
much.
me.
Thank you so much to everybody who was watching. Tonight, we were just talking about the impact on pregnancy, impact of COVID on pregnancy. It has been a fruitful conversation. It will be uploaded on YouTube. Check it out. And thank you so much. Have a good night. My name is Mahela Mulema. I am an executive coach, and this is Ignite Talk. Good night.
Bye.
Bye bye.